Hi everyone, my name's Edward Ross and I am a research officer for the Department of Classics at the University of Reading, and I'm researching generative AI. This video is a short introduction into what you should and should not be doing with generative AI when you're preparing assignments. So today we're going to be talking about what generative AI is, the ethical considerations behind using it, and the Department of Classics' AI guidelines and citation guide. It's our hope by the end of this video you should be able to stop and think before you generate. Alright? So, let's get started. So, I'm sure most of you have heard of generative AI before, either through advertisements on social media, discussions with family or friends, or through university guidance. Tools like ChatGPT, Snapchat AI, Google Bard, Claude 2, DALL-E, they're all quite popular and they have a wide variety of functions. Their increased popularity has led to a number of new tools appearing over the past few years, almost hundreds, including conversational AI tools, generative image AI tools, generative sound tools, generative presentation tools, generative video tools, and even AI-powered search copilots. Now, here's a few examples for you to look at. I won't be discussing these tools individually, but if you'd like to learn a bit more about them and the ways they could possibly be used, take a look at some of these resources right here. We'll also be putting some links in the description box. Although these tools are fascinating and have so many possible applications, it is important to understand what they exactly are and how they work. So I think the easiest way to understand or think about generative AI is like a complex input-output machine. Much like how a calculator can provide a solution to a math problem depending on your keystrokes, generative AI tools receive a prompt from a user, process it through its internal system that was developed using training data, and outputs the most likely response to the prompt according to its established context. In this way, we have to remember that these tools are not people. They cannot think, they cannot lie, and they have no intentions, okay? They're simply responding to your input in the most human-like and expected manner. Bearing this in mind, there are some limitations you should know about before using generative AI. First of all, the training data used to create generative AI has been seen as quite problematic. These large bodies of text, images, and videos are gathered and used to build the generative AI's knowledge base. So the sources for this information, however, has been left quite vague. At the bare minimum, generative text tools draw their training data from filtered Common Crawl data, web text, ebooks, and Wikipedia pages. AI developers like OpenAI have faced legislation and lawsuits related to copyright infringement and breaches of data protection over the past year, because many political bodies and artists fear that the data used in generative AI's training data was not obtained through proper channels. This includes illegal repositories of ebooks and personal data from social media. I'm not going to go into depth onto these cases, but you should know that the text and images used in generative AI are contested and may or may not be accurate. A further consideration is the limitation generative AI has related to its content it can discuss or create. AI developers train their AI programs with certain guardrails to prevent them from discussing topics which may be considered unsafe, inappropriate, or exploitative. This includes themes like politics, sexual content, weaponry, and crime. Instead of discussing these themes, generative AI will generally respond in two ways. Either saying it is unable to discuss the topic at all and stop the conversation, or it will answer the question without addressing any of the restricted themes, leaving a complete answer that lacks crucial information. When it comes to humanities and classics, these restricted themes are topics which are discussed in depth, and we expect you to engage with these topics with a full picture. Learning from potentially incomplete representations of the topic can be detrimental to your studies. The last detail we want to highlight for you is the environmental impact of AI. Recent studies have shown that the energy consumption required to train a single AI program is significant, and as models increase in size, so too will that consumption. On average, the amount of energy required to train and maintain Google Bard is equivalent to the energy consumption and carbon emissions of an entire country, specifically the size of Ireland. If you want to learn more about these ethics cases, we will share some links further in the description for you. Please do take a look. Moving on to actually using generative AI to support your studies, I'm now going to introduce you to the rules we are currently using in the Department of Classics at the University of Reading. So before I begin, I want to be very clear that these rules only apply to the Department of Classics here at the University of Reading. Every department and university has its own rules and methods in place for addressing AI, so please make sure to check the rules specific to your department before considering using generative AI tools. So, in the Department of Classics, each class has a slightly different manner of approaching generative AI because you are required to obtain express permission from your module convener before you consider using generative AI to support your assignments. This means that you must discuss what you would like to use generative AI for in your assignments for each class before you even touch a generative AI program. If your module convener does not approve AI use, you cannot use it, okay? Please bear this in mind because any generative AI use which is found without permission or improper attribution will be treated as academic misconduct. It is also important that if you do not have permission to use generative AI in your assignments, you should take all possible steps to prevent accidental generative AI use. There are several approved programs available to you which already have generative AI integrated into their system, such as Adobe programs, certain word processors, and Grammarly. And you are still allowed to use these programs so long as you turn off their generative AI function. In most cases, you can simply ignore suggested generative AI functions, but Grammarly does require you to go into the settings to turn off the generative AI function. Please make sure to check this setting next time you use Grammarly, especially if you have a green sticker. On the other hand, if your module convener does approve generative AI use for your assignment, you can use the tools in the agreed manner. But all instances have to be attributed properly and according to departmental citation guidelines. So, the Department of Classics does have a citation guide in place, and you can find it here, but I will do a quick overview of the details you need to know. First and foremost, any and all generative AI uses must be documented and maintained in an appendix at the end of your assignment. This will include any generative AI outputs that are used as part of your research, including those that physically appear in your assignment, or just those that were used to orient your thinking. Because most generative AI programs do not have stable links to their outputs, we want you to screenshot all of your outputs and keep them annotated with the following information. So first we have the name of the developer, so this is something like OpenAI, the AI tool name, such as ChatGPT, the AI tool model number, in this case ChatGPT 3.5. Then we want the update version at the time of use, so this case we'll be discussing January 12th, 2024. This is when the most recent update happened. The date the output was created, in case this was created today, February 22nd, 2024. And finally, the full prompt that was used. And then you put the full copy-pasted text of what you typed into the chat box. You will then make them into an itemized list in an appendix at the end of your assignment. This applies to any form of generative AI, be it text, image, audio, or video. Alright? If you decide to insert generative text or images into your assignment directly, please provide an in-text citation or caption indicating these same details. Finally, you need to put an explanatory footnote at the beginning of your assignment, usually at the end of your first sentence. So this is simply acting as a declaration of what tools you used in the preparation of your assignment so that your marker knows what to expect. Here is a standard template you can use. Now, these are just a few examples to get you on the right track, but you can find the full instructions listed in our departmental citation guidelines, which is through this link. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video has shown you a fuller picture of generative AI, how it works, and how to use it appropriately. If you have any questions or you want to learn more, please take a look at some of the links in the description. Thanks again, and remember, stop and think before you generate. Bye now.